Welcome back to our retrospective on Jimmy Buffett. In our last episode, we covered Jimmy's early life, how he got started as a musician, his move to Key West, and his first 5 albums. We also discussed the shady label that gave him his first record deal, as well as a particularly funny story about Jimmy getting into a scuffle with one of the most notorious figures in American law enforcement history. We left off in the mid-70s, with Jimmy scoring a few minor radio singles after being signed to a more legitimate record label. He was establishing himself as a credible songwriter by demonstrating a skill for conveying heartfelt emotion in his lyrics, along with a wicked sense of humor. Today, we will take a look at what Jimmy was doing in the second half of the 1970s. For starters, he provided the soundtrack for an obscure comedy film starring a young Jeff Bridges. After that, he introduced the world to the Coral Reefer Band with his album, Havana Daydreamin'. That album did not sell very well, but it would prove to only be a minor bump in the road, as he would then truly hit his stride by releasing 4 consecutive hit records that cemented his status as one of the best recording artists of the decade. The late 1970s was unquestionably the commercial and critical peak for Jimmy's catalog. So today's episode is going to be jam-packed with some of the most important moments of Jimmy's career. We will be discussing his career-defining track Margaritaville, his well-earned reputation of a must-see live show, and the string of hit songs that became the bedrock of his annual summer party tours. And we will once and for all settle the debate over what exactly makes up a proper cheeseburger in paradise. I should also note that we will be joined by a special guest today. Stephanie Myers from the Song Facts podcast will be visiting to discuss her favorite album of Jimmy's, which was released during this stretch. So without further ado, let's take a look back at the most successful years of Jimmy's career. Pour yourself something tall and strong. Make it a hurricane before you go insane. As over the next hour and change, my friend Chris and I will chronicle Jimmy's music and stories from 1975 through 1979. This is A Podcast Looks at Jimmy, Part 2, Jimmy Buffett in the late 70s. Welcome back to A Podcast Looks at Jimmy. This is Part 2, Jimmy Buffett in the late 70s. Today we are going to be covering Jimmy's commercial peak, his hot streak of the late 70s that made him the household name that he still is today. In our last episode, we covered his first 2 albums that were on the Andy Williams label, one of which didn't even get a release in that time. And then we talked about his next 3 albums that were on Dunhill Records. So we talked about early fan favorites like Pencil Thin Mustache, Come Monday, Why Don't We Get Drunk, Grapefruit Juicy Fruit, and A Pirate Looks at 40. But to set the stage for today, where Jimmy is at this point in his career, I'm going to read a quote from Ryan White's book, Jimmy Buffett, A Good Life All the Way. The magic was making the world believe Buffett was barely in control, that he wasn't anything more than the semi-sober performer they saw on stage. And he could do that as easily as he could wreck a rental car. What he couldn't do, as Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season so plainly admitted, was continue to run at the pace he was keeping. There was a physical toll, but the creative cost was the tricky one. I like that quote because it sums up his appeal. Like, he is this easy, freewheeling guy who just lives on this permanent vacation. But in reality, they were touring so hard and doing so many shows that it's a facade. He was the definition of work hard, play hard. Yes, he absolutely was debaucherous and, partied it up on boats. But to earn that vacation, he had to work like a motherfucker.
Right.
And to do some insane touring. So there's a magic to masking all that.
Yeah. Well, we've covered an artist who literally just did all the things that Buffett sings about doing, but only that.
Right.
And that's Zevon. You can't be Jimmy Buffett and have the success that Jimmy Buffett had and just do that.
Correct. It wasn't a big surprise. It wasn't a big mystery that Warren Zevon never really punched through commercially beyond one accidental hit.
He punched through everything else, just not commercially.
Yeah, a lot of walls. By the way, welcome back, Chris. Good to have you again.
Always good to be here.
All right. So we're moving into Jimmy's commercial peak of the late 70s. But before we get to the stuff that everybody knows, we do have some more obscurities to talk about real quick. I'm going to start with a soundtrack he recorded for a movie called Rancho Deluxe, which was released in March of 1975. This album is not a particularly big production. There's a couple of songs here, but most of the album is like instrumental pieces. There's a nice country twang guitar on a song called Ridin' in Style. Two of the songs here, called Wonder Why We Ever Go Home and Livingston Saturday Night, would be re-recorded for subsequent albums that we're going to cover today. There's another song here called Left Me With a Nail to Drive, where his bandmate Roger Bartlett sings lead. That's kind of interesting because Roger Bartlett was like the first of the Coral Reefers. He was the guy who convinced Jimmy to go beyond just a solo acoustic show. So they would perform as a duo in the early 70s, and then from there they built up the Coral Reefer Band, who we're going to talk about in this episode. I did not watch this movie. I watched the trailer for it.
Every cowboy has a dream of having his own Rancho Deluxe. The only thing that's different is how they go about getting it.
I thought it looked mildly interesting because you have a young Jeff Bridges, a young Sam Waterston, and one of my favorites, Harry Dean Stanton. Yeah. Also one of Bob Dylan's favorites, as we know. Yeah. Have you seen Rancho Deluxe?
No, I missed that one.
Yeah, I think everybody did. That's one of those movies where I'm surprised it even got a DVD release.
Oh, it'll get a Criterion at some point.
Yeah. Not a whole lot to say about that, but an interesting little obscurity in Buffett's catalog. But let's talk about his proper discography. So we're going to move ahead to January 1976 for his album Havana Daydreamin'. This is the first album to really feature the Coral Reefer Band. I'm going to read from the liner notes on this album because it speaks to why he wanted to bring a band on board. Quote, "There are now real coral reefers that have replaced the fictitious characters I used to employ. The band had its embryonic origin in a claustrophobic dressing room in Raleigh, North Carolina, surrounded on three sides by appreciative but fanatic fans who wouldn't let us out. I turned to Roger," that's Roger Bartlett, in parentheses, the mono reefer then, and calmly screamed, "I can't do this shit much longer. If I don't get a band, I'll go crazy." So I guess part of the appeal of having a band is you just have more bodies around you from when the screaming parrot heads are trying to break down your dressing room door.
I definitely think that's part of it. The other thing I'll say is it's so telling that he had a fictional Coral Reefers band before he had an actual Coral Reefers band, which is sort of par for the course in terms of the way in which he seems to operate.
Yeah.
He wills things into being through, I'm going to say it, vibes.
Yes, I agree. Have you looked up the names of his fake Coral Reefers?
I have not.
They all have jokey names like Marvin Gardens and Avocado and
LSD.
That would have been brilliant. But no, unfortunately, he did not bring on LSD. Probably because LSD's in jail.
LSD Jr. then.
Yeah.
Little LSD.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is the first album to feature a full band, and Coral Reefers would become a huge part of Jimmy's identity going forward, and so much so that Jimmy has passed away, but his band, the Coral Reefers, are still out there. They're touring this summer as the opening act for the Doobie Brothers. So all this to say is that the Coral Reefers are a serious backing unit. You know, when you talk about artists who do the whole and the X, Y, and Z's, how many of those groups are actual bands? You know, you have the E Street Band, right? The Coral Reefers.
The band.
Oh, the band. Yeah, Bob Dylan and the band. Yep, that's true. Not a huge list, but the Coral Reefers are on it.
R.E.M.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but they didn't tour as Warren Zevon and R.E.M. Okay, but let's talk about the actual album. I'm going to go ahead and say this is my favorite album cover of his whole catalog. What a great drawing of him or painting of him. It really captures Jimmy the man in the 70s.
It's not as Buffett-ish as some of his other album covers. I mean, he's on the beach.
Yeah, there's no joke.
There isn't. He's not on a boat. He's just him smiling.
It reminds us that he's a guy and he's not just a joke. You know?
Yeah.
So the album is dedicated to his grandfather, Captain James Delaney Buffett, and that's appropriate because there is a new version of his song that was written about Captain James Buffett, The Captain and the Kid. I like this version a little bit more than the original that we heard on Down to Earth, and that's because I like the strings that replace the acoustic guitar that's on Down to Earth. And I think it came about because Jimmy knew he had a really good song with that, and I imagine he had access to more studio musicians than he did when he was doing Down to Earth.
Sure.
So let's talk about some of the other songs on this album. One of my favorites is called Kick It In Second Wind, mostly because this is a song about what their crazy, chaotic touring life was like and what they had to do to keep going. So what are some of the songs you like on this record?
The whole first A-side, with the exception of Defying Gravity, I really like. I know Big Rig is not apparently a Buffett song. It's actually a cover. But I love Big Rig. It's one of my favorite songs that Buffett performs on any of his albums.
Big Rig is awesome. Let's talk about Big Rig for a minute. I wish it was a big rig.
And then the horns come in. It's great.
It reminds me that there was a whole trucking subculture that had like a moment in the late 70s. Have you ever seen the movie Convoy?
Of course.
Yeah, with Chris Christopherson and Ernest Borgnine. Well, there was a big song off that soundtrack, C.W. McCaw.
And it makes a lot of sense for Buffett to join in. I mean, everybody was, but it makes sense for Buffett because, in a weird way, trucks are kind of like the sailing ships of the highways, and the truckers, I guess, are like the pirates.
Oh, yeah, a shit ton of drug smuggling in both.
Yeah. That's a weird flex that America had for that, like, 10 years or whatever. Not even 5 years.
No, it's one of the more bizarre little cultural moments from the 70s, but some good stuff came about it. Like I said, the movie Convoy, but also another movie, one of the greatest movies ever, Smokey and the Bandit, Hello, the hit song Eastbound and Down by Jerry Reed, which is one of my favorite songs of the 70s. Have you seen Smokey and the Bandit?
Of course.
Yeah.
What's not to love? Right? I mean...
You know, when I heard Big Rig, I thought of Eastbound and Down, and then I was thinking about Jerry Reed. And it dawned on me that one thing we've been talking about on this show so far is we're trying to find songwriter comps for Jimmy Buffett. And I'm sure there's some parrot heads out there who aren't going to like this. But I think that Jerry Reed is a guy that has some crossover, we'll say, songwriting characteristics with Jimmy. There's a lot of humor. They're known for talking all through their shows. And they do that goofy wordplay stuff in the titles of their songs and the lyrics.
I mean, I think every songwriter does wordplay to an extent. And I think the most successful ones do quite a bit of it.
Yeah.
I've become convinced that his calling card really is just vibes.
Yeah.
And that's something Jerry Reed kind of had, I guess, but lacked in a marketable way. The vibes.
Yeah, the lifestyle vibes, which, no, Jerry didn't have that, but Jimmy absolutely embodies that, and I think that maybe is what sets him apart. It puts him in his own class because that is his appeal. Okay, anything else on the album you want to highlight?
Well, I do want to say, given you brought up wordplay, something so feminine about a mandolin.
Oof.
Both the title and then the track that it's titling are pretty terrible.
Yeah, that one I don't like either. You know, when I hear Losing My Religion, I'm not thinking, oh, that sounds so divinely feminine.
And ironically, it comes right after the song Clichés.
Yeah.
So, he knew what he was doing.
He knew it, yep.
It is a great album, though. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I like it too. Unfortunately, at the time, the general public didn't. This one did not sell very well. Nothing here charted. And if anything, it was a setback from the momentum he had coming off of A1A. And later that year, the album that mysteriously disappeared from his original record label, High Cumberland Jubilee would hit the record stores because, I don't know if it was Andy Williams, but someone in that organization noticed that Jimmy had a minor hit with Come Monday and was becoming a very popular live act. So they thought, I guess we better get this album that we buried for him out in stores after all. So he had one of those nice little moments of, like, competing against himself. You know what it reminds me of? You know the James Bond movie Never Say Never Again?
Yes.
Okay, the Sean Connery one from the 80s?
Yeah.
That was released right at the same time that the official James Bond movie Octopussy was in theaters. And they were like competing Bond movies going on at the same time. Maybe Jimmy had a moment like that. Well, it might have been a minor setback, but it really wouldn't matter in the end because in January 1977, he would deliver his record, Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes, which would contain, of course, the big hit that we all know and love, and that we'll get to that in a moment. But before we talk about Margaritaville, let's talk about some of the other songs in this album because I think Margaritaville overshadows the rest of this stuff here, which is a shame because this is a really good record. There's a lot of great music here. So let's talk about Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes. The title track is fantastic, and it's very simple. It's like about how great being on vacation is. Reminds me of Vacation by the Go-Go's.
Yeah.
And it was actually a top 40 hit. It hit number 37 on Billboard. What do you think of that song?
It's great. If we weren't all crazy, we might go insane.
Yeah, I think he had that etched on one of his boats. That is one of those brilliant lyrics. Again, that wordplay that we were talking about that says it all and, again, captures the vibe I think that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting song here is Banana Republics. And I got the impression that this is about basically just how American expatriates that live in the Caribbean suck and ruin a good thing. And it reminds me a little bit of the Eagles song, The Last Resort, which is all about if you call something paradise, people are going to show up and ruin it real quick. It's like how Key West was originally a kind of an obscure little place that became a tourist trap.
We live about an hour and a half away from that such place, which is Wisconsin Dells.
Yes.
John Steinbeck talked about that in his book, Travels with Charlie. As soon as you love something, it ends up just getting completely torpedoed. And he said it's on the way for Wisconsin Dells. And yeah, he was not wrong. That was in the 60s, and now look at it.
Yep.
Water park capital of the world.
Well, I hear they're getting a Buc-ee's soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Another one here is Tampico Trauma. That is a great song. That's
Great
a lot
song.
of fun.
Tampico Trauma is probably my favorite song on the album.
Okay, what else we got here? There's another one called Miss You So Badly, which obviously harkens back to Come Monday. He captures that emotion of missing a loved one really well. You know, that's one of his talents. He really taps into that.
Well, Lovely Cruise, I know he didn't write it, but Lovely Cruise is a nice song that kind of, again, captures loss. He seems to, I think he does better covering more, I guess you would say, melancholy songs than writing them himself.
He was definitely very particular with the songs he picked to cover, and he built upon them, that's the test. If you're going to cover a song, can you build upon it and make it your own, or are you just using it as a cheat code or something to fill out space on the record? Okay, let's talk about Margaritaville, the big hit. And it was a big hit at the time. I know that Jimmy thought the title track was going to be the lead-off single, but his record label correctly figured out that Margaritaville would have a bigger appeal. On the lyrics sheet in the record, there is a sketch of a vinyl, and it's got the wording Old Champs record next to it with a drawing of a tequila bottle. So that's a nice little reference to the song Tequila by the Champs.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a little fun.
You know what I wish?
What's that?
Now, you've handed me the album. Looking at the back of the album, I really wish this was the cover of Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes.
Yeah.
Nothing says the truth about who Jimmy Buffett was at this time than him balding,
Yep.
Shirtless in a black Speedo.
Yep.
But he's happy. He's smiling, and that's what you expect from Jimmy.
This is like the stereotype image of a parrot head.
Yes.
He captures the visual of his own fan base, yeah. Oh, that's great. So the song ended up being a top 10 hit. It was number 8 on the Billboard charts, and it became obviously a massive brand that we're going to talk about in the later episodes. I really don't want to talk about the Margaritaville brand. Let's just stay focused on the song itself. And I think the lyrics here are not necessarily the same party vibe that the live version of the song became.
It's less weekend warrior and more semi-functional alcoholic.
Yes, that is spot on, yeah. Although it's adapted as like a battle cry for the weekend warriors, you know? So how has your perspective on Margaritaville changed over time? Like, you know, when you first heard the song, did you like it? Now that we've listened to it, ideally with fresh ears, have you been able to shake off the reputation it has? Have you been able to listen to it as if you were hearing it for the first time?
When you listen to it removed from the party vibes that chase Buffett everywhere he goes, it definitely is a sad song about running away from the mess you've made with booze.
Right.
And being unable to find your shaker of salt. I don't know. I guess that's the nice thing about it is that you can take either reading. It both work.
That's a good point. I guess I'm trying to drill down to what was his original intention with the lyrics, because he did not know this was going to become a career-defining hit. He didn't think it was even good enough to be the lead-off single. So I wonder, what was he trying to say with the lyrics here? And I think it's, again, like you said, more functioning alcoholic, or more, hey, this vacation lifestyle isn't all fun all the time. There is a dark underbelly to it. There's more to the story. We don't have to over-mythologize it. It definitely includes some humor, and it absolutely can be construed into being a fun time drinking song. But I just think there's more to the subtext than the whole salt thing it became.
I think a greater emphasis should be placed on the dangers of flip-flops that are presented in the work.
He's done a good job of keeping just the word pop-top in the popular lexicon, because outside of that, when's the last time you've heard of anybody stepping on a pop-top? Like, most people today are like, what the fuck's a pop-top? All right, this absolutely started to solidify a fan base for him. And because it was a hit, it was breaking him into the world of celebrity. And it's around this time that he met the Eagles and did some opening shows for them. And I know you're cringing, but we're going to talk about the Eagles in a little bit. Here's a better one for you. It's around this time he became friends with Hunter S. Thompson.
Hunter S. Thompson and the Eagles just chase us around this podcast.
Yeah. Yes, they do. Okay. So that's a big hit. And it punches him through, again, to pop audiences. And because he's met the Eagles, he also met their manager, who is someone I mentioned in our Zevon podcast, Irving Azoff, who is one of the most famous music industry monsters. This was him during his manager days, where he was an absolute terrorist to deal with.
Can he be the official villain of this pod?
Oh, he's like the official villain of music fandom at this point. You know, I do give him credit that he did break through a lot of bands that I like, and I understand why Jimmy would want him as his manager. But yes, who the guy became, you know, again, he runs Ticketmaster, and that's one of the worst things for fans now.
Are there any good biographies? Has anyone done like a true hit piece on him?
Honestly, I have never heard of a book about Irving. I would suspect anyone trying to would be warned not to.
I'll get Kendrick Lamar's lawyer.
Yeah. Well, there's a line that I'm going to borrow from A Good Life All the Way that I think it was a quote from Glenn Fry, who said, when trying to find a birthday present for Irving, he said, "What do you get for the man who's taken everything he's ever wanted?"
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. So it's kind of a begrudging respect. Is like, yeah, this guy is a true monster who did exactly whatever he wanted, and again, to his credit, broke through some artists that I like. But anyway, so let's talk about the first album that Jimmy had with some real expectations, because now he's broken through. He's a top 10 artist. The one time in his career he's going to be on regular radio rotation, because one thing we didn't talk about too much in the last episode, he had almost no radio play. And sadly, even in this stretch of his career, even though he was having some hits, it wasn't a lot. It wasn't nearly the same level as what a James Taylor was doing as far as the charts go, or his buddies the Eagles, who were dropping hits left and right. He had a real struggle getting his songs on the radio. Margaritaville was just undeniable. So as we're moving on to the next record, it was called Son of a Sailor. It was released in March 1978. Before you and I talk about this album, I am happy to announce that we have a special guest. Well, we don't. I do. We, as in the collective we, the listeners, everybody. We have a special guest today who is another Jimmy Buffett fan that I talked to just recently about this album. This is Stephanie Myers, who is the host of the Song Facts podcast. Last year, she was putting together the Song Facts Holiday Songs Special podcast episode, and I sent her a Jimmy Buffett Christmas song because I knew we were going to be doing a lot of Jimmy Buffett coverage this year. And she emailed me back and said it was a cool pick because she's a Jimmy fan. And I thought, oh, wow, someone of our generation who also likes Jimmy, I want to hear what she has to say about his music. So she joined me for a bonus episode, which you can find on the YouTube channel, and I'll put it in the podcast feed as well. For the purposes of today, here is an abbreviated clip of our conversation about Son of a Sailor. And then after we hear that, we'll get back to our thoughts on the album.
Jimmy really falls under this category of songwriters that uses, I would say, mirth as a tool in his toolbox as a songwriter. And I think because of that mirth, he's sometimes not taken as seriously as other songwriters of his stature and of his category, but he should be. And I think he really balances what I think of as like this wry nostalgia with a great sense of humor. And there's a real self-awareness there. And the older I've gotten, the more I really appreciate him as a songwriter. The title track to me is very emblematic of Jimmy. It's Jimmy doing what he does best, which I think is like wistful without being maudlin. And of course, also nautical, which is very much on his brand. And I appreciate people who are on their brand, right? And I think that's great. The whole album really showcases his songwriting really well. Anecdotally, I will just say, man, this song's got some weird staying power. I just happened to see, it must have been a month ago on Twitter, it was this thread that just absolutely cracked me up. And this mom said, yeah, my sons came home and said, we're doing hula hooping for our talent show. She's like, they don't know how to hula hoop. And they said, well, not only are we hula hooping to this, Mom, they're like 5 years old, we're doing it to Cheeseburger in Paradise. And I was like, man, like, first of all, how cool are these kids? Yeah. And secondly, the staying power of this song, right? To be like, this is what we're going to do it to. And it was the funniest thing to me. And it was also like, oh man, of course. Like, that's a kind of a Jimmy story if I've ever heard one. It all felt really right. It all tied together for me to hear that.
All right. Generation Alpha is going to be okay.
Yeah. It's the kind of song, just, I would say, the backbeat and everything else, it's the kind of song that I always wonder why it didn't become kind of a classic rock station staple. It just seems like it would fit right within there. And I wonder that about a lot of songs, just as an album person, somebody who enjoys going through all of those. But to me, that one always stood out. It's like, oh, I'm kind of surprised. Like, it didn't end up on just the standard list because it feels like it fit right in there. I like Manana a lot too, which to me feels a little bit like an upbeat, long lost cousin of Margaritaville. And I always just have a little bit of nostalgia listening to it. But, he's just really good at tying a theme together. And I appreciate that with him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Manana definitely has points at the end of the verses where I think to myself, this is where they'd go, salt, salt, salt.
Yeah. He dedicates the album, and it even notes it at the end of the Spotify lyrics on African Friend, save the whale, save the earth, support Greenpeace. I'm like, man, that's so cool. That's so cool. It's nothing we didn't kind of already know about Jimmy, but it was like a nice reminder for me that he was kind of always this big supporter of something larger, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was definitely progressive guy. And I'm glad you mentioned that up because there's another lyric that we skipped over from Mañana. The closing line from Mañana is, I hope that Anita Bryant never ever does one of my songs. And she also just passed away just a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar, she famously led an anti-gay crusade back in the 70s and was kind of at the forefront of that social movement. And it's my opinion that she sucked.
Yeah.
It's awesome to know that Jimmy, kind of unprompted, just flips her off at the end of this song.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. Like he's kind of the master of the unexpected in some ways too, and where he would just hide these little Easter eggs throughout. I've always really appreciated that about him. And just, I appreciate people of his caliber who use their platform. Just deeply appreciated that about him, and it still feels like he was gone too soon. It really does.
Yeah, it does. Okay, again, that was Stephanie Myers from the Song Facts podcast. You can hear our full conversation on the YouTube channel and also in the podcast feed. I want to thank her for coming on the show. She was actually on the show a couple of years ago. We did a Halloween episode, which was a lot of fun. And she does a lot of great interviews over on the Song Facts podcast. So be sure to check that out. Links to her show are in the description. All right, now let's you and I talk about Son of a Sailor. Got another great title track, which is another tribute to his grandfather. This is very much a song along the lines of The Captain and the Kid. It is no secret that his grandfather, Captain James Delaney Buffett, is like the most important family figure in his life. Like his whole identity is driven from his childhood memories of being on that steamship with his grandpa. I love that, and I like the title, Son of a Sailor. It shows that his vibe is built out of his family tradition.
It's a little bit like, and we all know these guys, who they joined the military because their grandfather was in World War II and was highly decorated.
Yeah.
And then they go, and they're a desk jockey.
Oh,
they never actually, they talk about their time in Afghanistan, but they were just loading water bottles onto the truck. Son of a soldier,
Yeah.
I should stop here and say I'm being unnecessarily mean-spirited about Jimmy here. And it's not necessary. You know what it is? He gives off a little bit of like a frat bro vibe.
Sure.
And so it's kind of easier to pick on him than somebody who's the tortured artist kind of thing.
Yeah, big time. For those who've heard this episode, but not our previous deep dives on Bob Dylan and Warren Zevon, a lot of what we talk about with those guys is there's a lot of inner turmoil, a lot of social projection onto them. Both of those guys have tough roads. And we're not saying that Jimmy didn't have a tough road, but I think we can clearly identify that he was much better suited for that rough road. He was up for the challenges presented to him. And ultimately, that's a compliment.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we tease him and we pick on him a little bit, it's out of, if anything, begrudging respect for those aspects of his catalog. We're not treating him with kid gloves on this, and we're more comfortable laughing about him because he's so clearly more even-keeled than those other guys.
Right.
So let's talk about the album Son of a Sailor. The second song on the record is called Fool Button, which is just about getting blackout drunk. That's a good way to describe making the decision to go too hard, even if it's kind of an accidental decision. It's a good way to put that. I've had those nights, so it definitely captures something for me.
He describes what I can only assume is sort of the 70s Four Loko.
Yeah.
Which is rum and escatrol.
Oh my God, yeah. What was the song that he mentions Darvon on?
Oh, that's my what is it? My head hurts, my feet stink, and I don't love Jesus.
That's right. Okay, so another Zevon connection. The band is singing about Darvon, which was fucking discontinued. It was so brutal.
Darvon plus rum, though, is just a recipe for sleep. Escatrol, on the other hand, that's going to keep you going all night.
Right. And also, we know he was definitely dabbling in cocaine, so you're talking like a real rock star lifestyle at this point. I mean, he was definitely earning his rock star cred at this time. Another party song here, Livingston's Saturday Night, which was originally on the Rancho Deluxe album with some tweaked lyrics. Talked a little bit about this with Stephanie, but I think we have to dive in a little deeper on this here because this song is unhinged. The whole line that is tough to get around in this is sing a song, play some pong, shoot a little pool, hitting on the honeys right out of high school. Yeah, 15 may get you 20, but that's all right.
So one of the things that I read about the song is that it's not really Buffett singing it.
Right.
It's about like a small town. There's nothing much to do. There's one bar.
Yeah.
And the high school kids would show up and drink. It's saying it in more of a look at these losers kind of way than it's all right to hit on a 15-year-old.
Sure. If anything, he's reminding you that, hey, it's illegal. He's...
Well, yeah, the nice change from 16 to 15, that's the...
Yeah, so the original lyrics from Rancho Deluxe were 16 will get you 20. But yeah, that's definitely a line that if you're not familiar with Jimmy and this is like the first song you hear, you might get a real bad impression of him.
Yeah. You might want Buford Pusser to beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, well said. But here's my guilty admission. Livingston Saturday Night is one of my favorite songs on this album.
It's a good song.
It's a rocker. There's a movie from around this time called FM. Jimmy's on the soundtrack for it. And he's in the movie. And he's playing Livingston Saturday Night at the end of the movie because it's like a party scene.
Sure.
And it's an appropriate song for that. So I think that works. Okay. One of the better songs of the album, but not the most famous song on the album. The most famous song on the album, I guess, is his second most famous song ever, and it's another food and drink reference, Cheeseburger in Paradise. It wasn't his second biggest hit, but I think it's the song that's most associated with him after Margaritaville. And it's the only other song in his catalog that at one point became a restaurant chain.
And it has been my son, his favorite Buffett song since he was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah!
Because I don't think there's a single song that's more child-friendly than Cheeseburger in Paradise from the entire catalog.
That is so funny you say that because my girlfriend is not a Jimmy Buffett fan at all. And when she heard Cheeseburger in Paradise, she literally said to me, this sounds like a children's song.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like, great.
Yeah. But let's talk about the lyrics in Cheeseburger in Paradise, which are so much fun to sing along, but they have been misinterpreted over the years. Well, actually, there's been a couple of things misinterpreted about this song over the years. For starters, there's a whole bunch of restaurants in the Caribbean that have claimed that their cheeseburger is what inspired the song. Not the case. The song was inspired from a story about Jimmy being out on the water on his boat with a couple of friends, and they got a little lost, and they were out at sea longer than originally intended. They ended up getting back on course and finally getting to an island, but they were basically out of food at that point. And as soon as they were docked, they went to the first restaurant they could find and ordered cheeseburgers. And the burgers themselves were garbage, weren't anything special. Right. Might not have even been beef, but they were so hungry and so relieved to be back home safe that it was worth writing a song about. So any cheeseburger can be a cheeseburger in paradise, given the specific circumstances you're coming out of.
That's interesting to find out. I always assumed that it was a metaphor for Jimmy himself. That he is just the cheeseburger in paradise.
There is a story in Ryan White's book, Jimmy Buffett, A Good Life All the Way. Someone who was a friend of Jimmy's called him that. So I think that's where he got the title. The idea from the song is from being out on the boat, but the title is from, there was some inside joke about calling people cheeseburgers when they did something awesome. And the guy pointed to Jimmy and said, "You're a cheeseburger in paradise." And Jimmy was like, "That's a title."
Oh, that way. I was thinking like this all-American thing in the tropics.
Oh, yeah.
In the tropics. He is like a cheeseburger in paradise.
Oh, unintentionally, that totally works. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot more lore to this song than you might realize. But let's talk about the lyrics here. Let's talk about what makes up a proper cheeseburger in paradise, because there's a whole bunch of stuff out there that doesn't quite match up, and I think it's fair for you and I to be the final arbiters of this. Since we're doing a podcast about Jimmy, I think that makes us the final bosses of making the decision on this. Wouldn't you say that's fair?
I firmly agree.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm getting up right now, and I know you have the original album itself that we can look at the lyrics.
We're going to look at the liner notes, the actual lyrics on the website, and we'll start with the menu item, Cheeseburger in Paradise. Just earlier this year, I was at the Margaritaville at Navy Pier in Chicago. On their menu, the Cheeseburger in Paradise, the toppings are American cheese, lettuce, tomato, and pickles. And if you want, you can add bacon. Does that sound accurate to you?
Well, obviously the bacon, not included in the song.
Correct.
This is not canon Jimmy Buffett Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Yeah.
So I'm going to contend that the pickle shouldn't be on it.
Okay.
That the kosher dill is on the side.
Okay. Let's go to the actual lyrics.
Let's do it.
Cheeseburger in Paradise. Heaven on earth with an onion slice.
I'm in agreement with them. An onion belongs on a burger.
Okay, so the Margaritaville chain whiffed. They don't have the onion slice, which is good for me. I don't like onions.
Yeah.
But if you would think if there was one burger chain that would get the Cheeseburger in Paradise correct, you would think it would be Margaritaville.
It should at least be on the side.
Okay.
Its mere presence may offend.
Okay, let's go back to Jimmy's words. I like mine with lettuce and tomato.
Yep.
Heinz 57 and French fried potatoes. Big kosher pickle and a cold draft beer. Well, good God almighty, which way do I steer for my Cheeseburger in Paradise? So I like mine with lettuce and tomato. So lettuce and tomato would be on the burger. Heinz 57 and French fried potatoes.
That's a unit.
Okay.
Those are together. Neither is on the burger.
So to be clear, you are not putting Heinz 57 on the burger.
I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is that the kosher pickle and the draft beer, those I don't think are going on the sandwich either.
Yeah.
I mean, the beer's certainly not getting poured over the burger.
Obviously. And neither are the
So
fries.
I feel like the pickle is and the beer are a unit as well.
Oh,
you
put
get that
the
salty, crunchy pickle, and then you have that refreshing beer afterwards.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, you don't put the pickle in the beer?
I mean, I have.
Heinz 57 and the French fried potatoes, yeah. Definitely a unit. When I've ordered this at the various Margaritavilles I've been to, I put, the Heinz 57 on the fries, but I'll be honest, I put it on the burger too, so I might not have been doing this right.
See, I can't get behind putting ketchup on a burger, but not also putting mustard.
Oh, we're tapping into another controversy here. Going a little bit deeper into the lyrics. Cheeseburger is paradise, medium rare with Munstered be nice.
Yeah.
Not mustard. A lot of people seem to think the word is mustard would be nice on the burger.
And they'd be forgiven because, as we just found out,
on the official lyrics sheet for the original pressing of Son of a Sailor, going to the lyrics of Cheeseburger in Paradise, Cheeseburger is paradise, medium rare with mustard be nice. And they have the apostrophe after mustard. So it's like a weird grammatical decision there,
with
too.
Mustard be nice.
Right.
That's totally wrong. It's like he's imploring you to be nice.
Yeah, so the lyrics sheet for Son of a Sailor gets the lyrics wrong. So I don't know if he was sending over early versions of his lyrics or if they were listening and transcribing and doing it kind of haphazard.
I think they were transcribing.
Must be. That's what's caused this whole Munster controversy. So does that mean that the menu for the Chicago Margaritaville is also wrong by having American cheese when it should be Munster cheese?
So it's wrong, but again, they're forgiven because American cheese is better, I think, on a cheeseburger.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay, but here's the lyric that maybe washes all of this away, and it gives us some artistic freedom with what we want to put on our cheeseburgers in paradise.
Okay.
Not too particular, not too precise. I'm just a cheeseburger in paradise, which means these are recommendations, not requirements for a cheeseburger in paradise.
Okay.
Case closed.
I love it.
Yeah, there we go. We did it. We solved Cheeseburger in Paradise. Oh, boy. See, listeners, aren't you glad you tune in for this valuable insight and content here? I mean, we're really paving new ground.
And that burger's no longer medium rare. It is well done, and we should move on.
Yes. Okay, yeah, let's wrap up Son of a Sailor. A couple of other good songs here. I like Cowboy in the Jungle, which is another one about American tourists kind of ruining things, ruining a good time. But there is a lyric in here, trying to cram lost years into 5 or 6 days. That is such a brutal line.
It really is.
Yeah.
His shrimp boots are also... I
Yeah.
don't know what that is. What is a shrimp boot?
I don't know.
I was trying to figure that out.
Shrimp skin boots?
Shrimp skin boots. What the hell is that?
I don't even want to guess, because that would be so gross.
Can you imagine skinning shrimp? They don't have skin.
Right.
I will say I really do, and it's, again, a cover. I really do love the song Coast of Marseille, and I'm very happy that Buffett introduced me to Keith Sykes, who's quite good.
Yeah, so did you listen to anything else from Keith Sykes?
A little bit.
Yeah, because he's got another song on here that Jimmy covered.
Oh, it's the last line.
Yeah, the last line.
Which I don't like as much as at least Buffett's version of it.
Fair enough.
As Coast of Marseille. And he also, the dedications of this album I like. Because save the whales.
Right.
Save the earth. And support Greenpeace.
Yes.
Not the Sierra Club.
Oh, okay.
Greenpeace, the more radical environmental movement.
Yeah, I was talking about this with Stephanie, that Jimmy is making it known that he's a progressive guy and that these causes were important to him. And it would make sense, because if you're somebody who likes to go on these vacations, well, yeah, you want to preserve and protect the stuff that's already there. You don't want industry coming in and ruining it. Shortly after this album was released, in May of 1978, Jimmy broke his leg while playing baseball.
Okay.
And that would affect him for his tour to promote that album. He had to wear a cast, and that inspired a number of lyric changes for his songs that would be recorded for his live album. Okay, well, let's talk about this live album, because this live album is awesome, and it's a standout from his live catalog, which in his later years became massive. I would say overly so. The number of official live releases from him in the 2000s made it look like he was, I don't know, chasing the Grateful Dead, trying to get his live stuff out there. I think he eventually transitioned to getting all his live shows up on his Sirius XM radio channel. But, when you're talking about the live catalog from Jimmy, so many of those are basically the same album over and over again,
Sure.
and really not worth your time. I think his live album from 1978, You Had to Be There, is absolutely not in that class, and I think we'll talk about some others that are also pretty good. This one's special because it captures him in his prime. It captures him in this tour cycle to promote these songs that became his most beloved, but this is when they were fresh and new, and he was still experimenting with them a little bit. Like the live version of Margaritaville on this album does not have the salt, 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 hang on, hang on, hang on chants, which, yes, when you're at the show, that shit's really fun. And yeah, maybe on a later live album, I'm okay with that, but they weren't doing that originally back in his heyday. That came much later.
I love the inclusion of Perrier Blues.
Oh, yeah?
Which is in no other... That's not on any of his studio albums, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We haven't talked about it yet, so no, I don't believe so.
Because he says this is a new song, and I listened to it and said, I wonder if this is on any of his studio albums. And I looked it up. I couldn't find it. And you know what? It's a good choice.
Yeah, you like the song?
No, I'm saying it's a good choice. It's not on any of his studio albums. Because he's not known for Perrier. He's known for margaritas.
That's absolutely well said. Let's go back to margaritas. And another thing about the version of Margaritaville on this record is that it contains the lost verse that was cut from the original studio version. So this is the lost verse that he originally wrote for this song, but eventually cut from the studio version. He includes it in the live version here. I'll play a clip. Okay, and then the verse goes... Old men in tank tops, cruising the gift shops, checking out the Chiquitas down by the shore. They dream about weight loss, wish they could be their own boss. That 3-day vacation becomes such a bore. Again, that last line, kind of brutal.
Yes. We're thankful Jimmy doesn't specify the age of those Chiquitas.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. But there's still more differences in the lyrics. This, again, might be a little more appropriate for the times. Let me read from here. I blew out my flip-flop, stepped on a pop-top. I broke my leg, had to limp on back home. God, I still feel pain. I wish I had some cocaine, but that's been gone since early this morn. So here he is, changing up the lyrics and overtly saying, get me some coke.
Yeah.
And I think in the song, Why Don't We Get Drunk, he changes the lyrics to make them more about pot. So he's bringing the drug references into the live show.
You know, Joe, I'm starting to think that that's not salt in the shaker.
Oh. He seems a little worried about that salt shaker. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because it's lost, but presumably he could find another one somewhere.
Right, it's on his mind. Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah, that's bugging him. Where's my lost shaker of salt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this live album, and I think it's probably his best one. There's one or two others we'll talk about in future episodes, but those are all from his legacy years. This is from his prime. All right, let's move on now as we are getting to the end of the decade and our last album that we're going to talk about today, which is my favorite of this run, Volcano, released in August 1979. And this one is, I guess, my favorite because he is in full-on party mode. He has cemented his identity for this stretch of his career, and he is leaning in, and he's bringing his fun side to the forefront, and I think that's when he's at his best, and he delivers some absolute bangers. Fins, okay? Another decent hit, at least for him. It was a top 40 hit, number 35 on Billboard. A song that became a huge sing-along in concerts, so much so that there's that the shark pose that his fans do, fins to the left, fins to the right, put your hands above your head.
You're just moving your hands. You have to move the whole, the listener can't see it. You got to move the whole body.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, correct.
Or was I just moving my whole body when we went? It's possible.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you can find some great videos of entire stadiums of people in later years doing exactly that. It's an awesome visual. You know, we're talking about his brands a little bit. The last line on this song says the sharks that swim on the land, which is where his brand Land Shark Lager was drawn from. That's my favorite beer. I've talked about that a little bit on this channel in the past.
It's also another, SNL.
Who is it?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
the Land Shark. Telegram.
Who is it?
Plumber.
Plumber? I didn't ask for a plumber. Who is it?
Telegram.
Oh, telegram. Just a moment.
Land shark. Cleverest species of them all.
Then, of course, we got the title track. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to go. Again, another great sing-along. I love that one. It's another fan favorite.
Mr. Utley.
Mr. Utley, yes.
Is it like a steel drum or something he's doing, or what is that?
I'm not sure what he's playing offhand. I just know that Mike Utley was like the longest serving member of the Coral Reefer Band, and he was absolutely like Jimmy's most trusty sideman. You know, there's a select few of artists who are very close to Jimmy, and Utley's at the top of that list. So he deserves the shout out. You know, my favorite part of that song is that Don't Want to Land breakdown at the end of the song. Don't want to land in no 3 Mile Island. Don't want to see my skin aglow. That whole bit where he's breaking it down. I love that so much.
Yeah, it's a great song.
Yeah. And then another banger, which is a favorite of both of ours, Boat Drinks.
Oh.
Fucking Boat Drinks.
For a long time, that was certainly up there for my favorite Jimmy songs.
Yeah.
It's a great song.
And another Coke reference. We gotta go where there ain't any blow, where my fencing solo.
And there's a story behind that song, too, I think. He was with somebody from the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I don't know the story offhand, but yeah, it was inspired by being up in Boston and wanting to get out of there because the weather was so cold, and he was much more accustomed to that sweet, warm weather of the Caribbean.
I think he stole a car. I think it's another drunk driving story from Jimmy.
There's a number of those, unfortunately. Yeah, boat drinks is a jam. I think Ryan White writes about what goes into a boat drink.
Oh, really?
In the book. And you know what? Let me see if I can find it real quick here. Over the years, boat drink has become a generic term for anything tropical, usually frozen. The original, quote, I think it's rum and Perrier, as Jimmy defined it. Okay, now wait a minute. Maybe he kind of is known for Perrier. Maybe he drinks a couple of those to break up the booze to prevent hangovers.
Yeah.
I used to do that. It never worked, but drinking water in between drinks to reduce the hangover the next day. Now I'm old enough where I'm hungover no matter what. But
I assume it was the French connection because he's got the chanson pour les petits enfants.
Oh, yes. Yeah, song for the little children or something like that.
Which is Cheeseburger in Paradise. It's a song about Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, going back to Cheeseburger in Paradise, given that it is so, child-friendly and a sing-along, another interesting lyric in that, losing weight without speed. What a wild lyric for a song that, again, became so child-friendly.
You know what? I think I've always misheard that lyric and never really investigated it. As much as I've looked into that song, I was losing weight with great speed.
Oh!
Because he's eating sunflower seeds and drinking lots of carrot juice and soaking up rays. You kind of ruined the song for me.
Oh, no. What have we done? Nope. Another fucking controlled substance reference. You know the song Heavy Fuel by Dire Straits?
Oh, believe me, I do.
Oh, hell yeah, we do. Jimmy Buffett was running on some heavy, heavy fuel in those days.
They were also eating cheeseburgers.
Yeah, that's right. 6 cheeseburgers and scotch all night.
Nicotine for breakfast just to get me right.
Oh, man. All right. We're a full-on Dire Straits podcast now.
That's all it is.
What are some of the other songs here that you like?
So I joked about it, but I do like Chanson pour les petits enfants.
Yeah, it's nice.
Nice one. His 3 big ones.
Yeah.
And then what I mentioned, those are the ones I like from this.
Yeah. There are some, shrugs like Treat Her Like a Lady. That's about the ocean. And I guess the interesting point is the last song of the album, Sending the Old Man Home. Nice little tribute to an officer of the sea, I guess. Maybe it's kind of about his grandfather, I don't know. But the interesting point there is that you have James Taylor on acoustic guitar. And that's to bring up a point that we're talking about Jimmy's celebrity era. This is when he's breaking through. He's a hot new artist as far as pop audiences are concerned.
Sure.
In Warren Zevon's equivalent era, that was Celebrity Central. Everybody was coming out to play on Warren's record. We haven't talked about any celebrity guest stars on really any of these albums that Jimmy's done. It's an interesting distinction from even Dylan, who in his later period, again, had all kinds of people who desperately wanted to work with him. Jimmy's recording was a little more insular. But cool to see James Taylor show up because James Taylor absolutely at the time was a contemporary.
And also it's a good example of maybe why you don't want to do that, especially if you have sort of a singular vision. Because in Dylan's case, we ended up with Under the Red Sky, which is not a good album, though.
No, it's a suck-ass album. Despite, Slash and David Crosby and everybody else who was hanging around in the studio. Yeah, that one sucks. So, yeah, you know what? Again, Jimmy's got his vision. He's got his people he trusts. I imagine James Taylor was someone, as a songwriter, he had a strong appreciation for, so I could see why he'd want to bring him in. And again, James only played acoustic guitar. Although, I will say, do you know the song Thunder Island by Jay Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, I love Thunder Island.
I do, too. Well, that's Joe Walsh on the guitar.
Of course it is.
I would have loved a Thunder Island with Joe Walsh on guitar from Jimmy Buffett. Give me a rocker with Jimmy out front and his buddy Joe Walsh playing guitar. That could have been awesome coming from this era.
It's interesting. Nothing that Buffett did is really yacht rock or even yacht rock adjacent.
And the original yacht rock guys who invented the term, and did the series, they can't stand Jimmy.
Right.
They have a firm anti-Jimmy Buffett approach. They make fun of him in the original yacht rock series. We'll talk about that more in later episodes. But yeah, you're right. He really didn't cross over into that Kenny Loggins, Christopher Cross, kind of thing.
It's a shame.
I guess so, yeah, because I mean, given how many songs he writes about boats and actual yachts and being on the sea, you know, he could have fit into that, but I guess he wasn't smooth enough. You know, that's always the thing with them. You got to be smooth. Well, that will wrap it up for Buffett's releases in the late 70s. Talked about a lot of great music here. Couple of misfires, but by and large, these are really strong albums. And as much as I liked the records we covered in our last episode, with the exception of Rancho Deluxe, I think I enjoy all of the albums we've talked about today more than all of the albums we talked about in the last episode. Would you say you're on those same lines, or?
I would agree.
Okay, very cool. Well, pick out your 3 favorites for the albums, and I got my whole record collection of Jimmy is right here. I can show them to you. What's your top 3 favorite albums from this era?
So, I mean, if we're including the live album,
sure,
then I would definitely put that on there.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's a solid live album, it's indicative of the live experience, like that we had. A little different, obviously, like you mentioned, but I dig it.
It's a good live album.
Yeah. Then Havana Daydreamin', for the studio albums, is probably my favorite of them. And then I suppose Son of a Sailor.
My 3 are the last 3 studio albums. Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes, Son of a Sailor, Volcano. That to me is just an absolute hot streak. A good mix of hits and fan favorites that have stood the test of time. Unfortunately, these songs just weren't as big on the radio as other artists who were absolutely hitting their stride in this same exact time period. I did a podcast series about Bob Seger late last year, and this exact stretch, late 70s, was when Bob was a hit machine and firing on all cylinders and just killing it, and that's when his best stuff is. Steve Miller hits his stride right in these years. The Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, again, firing on all cylinders, hits for days and days and days. Jimmy is in that class of artists as far as longevity and fan bases, but his songs were not as ubiquitous with the radio as those other groups I was talking about.
Sure.
So that's a shame. All right, let's talk about some of these songs that should have been bigger radio hits, but unfortunately only really one was. Tell me your top 5 songs from Jimmy in the late 70s.
He didn't write it, but I'm putting Big Rig on here.
Hell yeah.
That's a great song. Same with Fool Button.
Okay.
That song is absolutely fantastic.
He did write that one.
I do like My Head Hurts, My Feet Stink, and I Don't Love Jesus.
Have you had mornings like that where the hangover's so bad that it's just like, fuck everything?
I've definitely had mornings where my feet stink.
But you've always loved Jesus.
I've always loved Jesus.
Yeah, of course.
And then I of course, I love Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Yeah.
I love Boat Drinks.
Yeah. Interesting that Head Hurts, Feet Stink, Don't Love Jesus, over Margaritaville, over Volcano, over Fins?
Volcano would be the only one that I would think could hedge out
Nothing wrong with
one of the other ones. You know what? Put that on there instead of Big Rig, because it's not technically a Jimmy song. I'll replace that with Volcano.
Oh no, I've taken Big Rig off the list. That's terrible.
That's what you did.
What have I done?
Tampico Trauma is really good. There's a lot of great songs. It's easier, I think, to just compile a bunch of great songs from this time period.
No, that's a good point. I mean, maybe his hit to misses ratio is better than what we saw in the previous episode.
Yeah.
No shortage of good songs from this era. This is him at his commercial peak. These are some of the songs that I've known my whole life. And as much as I love something like Big Rig, I just can't shake off my old favorites. But I do agree with you on a couple. Boat Drinks and Cheeseburger in Paradise, absolutely. But then I've got to go with the obvious ones. Fins, Margaritaville, and Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes. These are songs you just sing along with. These are the songs that I bought my first Jimmy Buffett concert tickets for back in 2009 to see those songs, and listening to them with fresh ears on my record player, I gotta say, was a great experience, and it's so much fun to revisit them. So the long and short of it here is that Jimmy was putting out some damn good work at the end of the decade here. All right, looking forward to our next episode. We are going to be going to part 3, Jimmy Buffett in the early 80s. 1980 to 1984, in which we're going to cover his first live concert film, which I believe is only available on VHS. So you're going to have to come over here and watch it with me. His first forays into the business side of Margaritaville. So we'll start to have those conversations. And of course, the 4 studio albums that came out in the early 80s. So would you say that's uncharted territory for you? Do you know anything about Jimmy post 1980 as far as his catalog goes?
So I have now listened to Coconut Telegraph, which I can't wait to talk about it.
That's promising.
And then obviously his compilation album. I have that on multiple formats.
Very good, very good. Yes, we're going to get to that, I think, in part 4, actually.
Okay.
No shortage of interesting topics that we will be covering, even though we've really covered the meat, the cheeseburger of this paradise we've covered in this episode. So that's going to be fun. I want to give a special thank you to Stephanie Myers, who appeared for a conversation about Son of a Sailor. You can find that up on the YouTube channel. It was great talking with her again. You can also check out the podcast she does, the Song Facts podcast. Links to that are in the description of this pod. Otherwise, I need to cite the book that is absolutely the backbone of my research for these episodes. It's called Jimmy Buffett, A Good Life All the Way by Ryan White. You can find Ryan on Blue Sky. I have talked to him previously. He knows we're doing these episodes. He's already agreed to come on and visit with us once this series is wrapped up. Great guy. So looking forward to talking to him about Jimmy. Are you still reading A Pirate Looks at 50?
Yeah, no, I am.
Yeah. Any new revelations from that?
I think I said this in the last one. I'm learning a lot about seaplanes.
Well, that's good, because I'm sure you'll be in the market for one pretty soon, right?
Figuring out how long it actually can take to read through a 300-page book.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of when I tried to read it. Okay, well, let's get out of here. Chris, thank you so much for joining me here. Always a blast talking music with you. Hope we had some fun. And I'm going to play us out with a song that we both had in common. Not Cheeseburger in Paradise, because we covered it pretty in-depth earlier. Let's play fucking Boat Drinks.
All right.
Boat Drinks, baby. Hey, thanks for listening. You know, there's no shortage of great content out there, so you choosing to spend some time listening to this show means quite a lot. If you're so inclined, please give this podcast a 5-star rating and a positive review wherever you get your podcasts. And share our links wherever you can. Or mention this show to anyone you know looking for a podcast recommendation. All of this helps us out a great deal, and I appreciate it. You can connect with us on social media too. We are at Play That Podcast on Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, and even TikTok. Or we are at Play That Rock and Roll on YouTube and Instagram. Please post a comment and say hello. Finally, Play That Rock and Roll is a proud member of the Pantheon podcast community. So if you're looking for more music podcasts beyond this one, trust me, start with Pantheon. You won't be disappointed. Otherwise, I appreciate any and all efforts you take to support us here at Play That Rock and Roll. Be sure to join us next time for more great music and stories from the world of classic rock.